to the tasks for Unit 2, Lesson 3. This is U2L3, so go to the Disease and Health Canvas homepage, and you can either look under assignments or scroll down to the weekly calendar and find today's date. You'll find the plan for today's lesson and everything that we're going to do. In the chat right now, I've posted a question. If you had to eat one meal every day for the rest of your life, what would it be? I'm going to give you 30 seconds to think about it, and then I'll throw you in breakout rooms to share your answer, and we'll come back together for a quick share. All righty. Most of you able to get through the form? Bacteria are pretty incredible, aren't they? It's mind-boggling to me, the whole endospore thing, just how they can literally resist heat, resist being desiccated, just survive as a dry powder, and then the minute they're activated, they can start to grow again. It's kind of scary. And then figures that we would then weaponize things like that. All right, we are all back. So again, this wasn't graded or anything. What I'm going to do is just pull up the responses. We'll look through them together. I'll share my screen here and see how we're feeling. Again, I find bacteria really fascinating. I know viruses get a lot of attention, but I think infectious bacteria are also kind of a big public health issue that needs to be dealt with. So which bacterial infection is widely vaccinated against? It is indeed tetanus. Tdap stands for tetanus, diphtheria, and then there's something pertussis. I can't remember what the A is. What makes anthrax so effective as a bioweapon? It is because it forms endospores. So remember, endospores is basically it's like a cell wall and a membrane and another cell wall and another membrane, and it basically just keeps the bacteria alive in a dormant form to the point where it can survive as a dry powder that can be, famously mailed in an envelope or something like that, or put into some kind of explosive device. Which toxins released by Mycobacterium tuberculosis? You just had to look this up. It's MBCT. I honestly did not take the time to look up what that stands for, but I'm sure the T has something to do with tuberculosis or something like that. Which bacterium disrupts acetylcholine signaling in the muscles? This sounds like a horrible thing to experience. They call it lockjaw. It is tetanus. Basically, all your muscles start to flex and contract, and you lose control of it. Anyway, not a pleasant thing to witness or experience. Which bacterium is gram-negative? I was struck by this, that only one of them was, which was cholera. Tuberculosis actually doesn't even fit into that classification. It's not gram-positive or gram-negative. They use a different stain for it because it's got a very different outer membrane. But everything else is gram-positive. So gram-negative just means that it is a little harder to wipe out with antibiotics. They tend to be resistant to penicillin and things like that, which were widely used. So farmers, vets, butchers, military personnel, it's anthrax. Anthrax is zoonotic, meaning that it jumps out of animals. So anyone working closely with animals is at high risk. But military personnel comes from the fact that it is weaponized as well sometimes. Not widely anymore, but it's something that I think is still being used in some places. The most deadly bacterial infection in the world, 1.5 billion people in 2018 died of tuberculosis. Still kind of scary. And what's worse is that they are now seeing more and more multi-drug resistant forms of TB. It's a big problem, especially in prisons in parts of the world, because if you have an outbreak inside a prison, it's hard to contain. And again, it's also a bacterium that you can have in your lungs and show no symptoms. A lot of people actually have TB, don't even know it. And then it only attacks when the immune system is compromised or when it spreads to somebody else. And then which bacterial infection can cause diarrhea and vomiting? Those are key signs of cholera. But again, it's so violent and frequent that you can't even hold down liquids. And so people usually die of malnutrition, dehydration, and just general weakness, which doesn't sound fun. I mean, none of these sound fun, but all right, those are key takeaways from that table. Hopefully the table was useful. Might be something you can use on a future assessment as well. Any questions or comments on that? Okay, then we're going to move on to one more activity to discuss the antibiotic use issue and the crisis that the healthcare world is facing. You had to watch those two ed puzzles, which I hope were interesting. I'm going to test fire an activity with you. I would normally do this in the classroom. I don't know if you've ever heard of four corners, where like the teacher would put up like little posters of like agree, disagree, neutral, and you would all walk to those things. I want to try doing that here using breakout rooms. So what I'm going to do is read two statements. We'll start with the first one. And then all I want you to do is in the chat, you can text everyone or me your response. Your options are to either agree, disagree, or you're neutral / undecided. So that's what you'll be typing in the chat in response. The first statement relates to the first video that you had to watch on Edpuzzle. I'll throw the statement in the chat as well so you can see it. So I'm going to read the statement, and again, you just need to decide whether you agree, disagree, or you're neutral or undecided about it. And then what I'm going to do is split you into breakout rooms where you can kind of share why you feel that way. So like there'll be an agree breakout room, a disagree breakout room, a neutral breakout room, and then we'll come back together. You'll pick a speaker, and we'll come back together to do a little share. So first statement is antibiotic use should be strictly monitored and only prescribed to patients in the most extreme cases. Go ahead and chat back to me now how you feel about that. Agree, disagree, or undecided. All right, and then bear with me here. I'm going to try to create 3 breakout rooms for these different topics. All right, looks like I've heard from pretty much everybody. So, all right, I'm going to throw you into rooms together, starting with the agree group. So just give me 1 second. Okay. Nice. We actually have a fairly even distribution here. I'm surprised. I was kind of worried that people would be all over the place, but all right. Thanks for waiting. Rooms are open. You should be with people who shared the exact same opinion. Discuss it for 2 minutes and we'll come back together. All right, looks like we are all back. So we'll just go through each group and kind of share your key points about whether or not you think antibiotics should be strictly controlled and only prescribed in most extreme cases. Let's hear from the agree group first. Who is your speaker?
That's me. So we thought that, especially because we're not developing any new drugs, that antibiotics should be reserved so that drug-resistant strains don't continue to develop, or at least don't continue to develop as quickly. For example, in the slums of Haiti and prisons of Siberia, DRTB, drug-resistant tuberculosis, has become rampant, and it's really hard to treat because the only way you can treat it is basically intensive care, which isn't affordable, especially for people of low economic status. So I think it should be used. The antibiotics shouldn't be used when other forms of treatment are available, which is often the case.
Well said. Disagree group. Who's your speaker?
I am. So we talked about how like antibiotics can be used to treat cases where it's not extreme, but it's just more convenient to like just get over whatever you're sick with, and like who's to define what an extreme case is, and like if you get an early diagnosis of something but it's not extreme yet, you should be prescribed with whatever could suppress the bacteria. Instead, wait until it gets extreme and then get prescribed antibiotics. So that's what we kind of talked about.
Nice. Good salient point from both sides. Neutral group. Who was your speaker?
Yeah. So we basically said we were kind of neutral because with all medical care and all medical issues, there's so much nuance involved. Like so many individual cases, and you look at the big picture, you don't consider the individual person's needs. So to Zach's point, we thought, oh yeah, it's not great that that this could be creating some more super bugs, if you will. But at the same time, think about the individual person. They need an antibiotic. They don't want to wait and get sicker and sicker and sicker trying to explore other mediums of like treatment. So it just has a lot of nuance, I guess. So we just didn't take a side, thus neutral.
Yeah. It's kind of the point of this too. It's a little rigged by giving you just one statement that it moves away from that nuance and case by case idea. But very good. So agree group, you have good points about how the widespread use of antibiotics has gotten us to where we are now with antibiotic resistant strains, and it's becoming more of a problem, right? Like we've been using antibiotics to treat these, but we're just kind of making the disease situation a little bit worse. But disagree group, you make a good point about how we need to treat these things early, and who's to say what's going to become extreme or not. So it's this kind of delicate balance, and I do think that the neutral group, it's sort of the best thing where it's got to be case by case. You get into some dangerous stuff with then trying to control who has access and who doesn't, which is always going to be an issue in the medical world. So definitely something I encourage you to keep reading up upon. And I ran into an interesting situation a couple of years ago. This is before the pandemic, but when I taught biology, I proposed the same idea that this sort of widespread use of antibiotics and hand sanitizer and stuff was causing kind of strengthening these diseases. And this was in the middle of flu season on campus, and being on duty in the dorm. Do you guys remember we used to go to dinner check-in? We'd all stand in a line next to each other and check into dinner. We put some hand sanitizer out, and there were a couple students who went up and said they didn't want to use the hand sanitizer because I had said that it would just make the bacteria stronger. So that struck up some conversation amongst the teachers, which was funny. So good thing to kind of keep reading about, because it's definitely an ongoing issue. So one possible solution is the idea of signing up for prescriptions, because the other issue with antibiotic stuff is that as we develop more effective ones, it's not profitable for pharmaceutical companies to make them, which is kind of a ridiculous situation, but it's the reality, right? That if someone's going to take an antibiotic for a short period of time and then they get over their disease, they're not going to sell that many of those pills, and it's just not profitable. And so governments, especially in England now, the NHS is really trying to find ways to keep pharmaceutical companies funded and motivate them to continue to research into antibiotics. And that one idea is prescriptions. So I want to share a quick little short website article I found right here that relates to that. I'll just skim the very beginning here. But could Netflix-style subscription models work for medicine? So healthcare authorities around the world are seeking to find innovative ways to fund essential medicines, specifically antibiotics. One of the ideas that floated has been a Netflix-style subscription model where companies are paid an upfront fee rather than for individual medicines. And they elaborate a little bit more here, that due to flaws in the funding of the methods of essential medicines, hinder the research and development to prevent these drugs from being accessible to all healthcare authorities. One such solution is a Netflix-style subscription model where pharmaceutical companies receive upfront payment for their drugs, and this is coming from monthly payments from subscribers, quote unquote, rather than being paid based on the volume of pills prescribed. That's the problem, right? Because they're not prescribing that many if they're effective. This approach offers potential value for stakeholders in pharma industry, healthcare providers, drug companies. It could potentially be a win-win overall. So the new statement, and we'll do this just one more time here that I want you to consider. I looked up the current charge for Netflix. Does anyone know the charge for a standard Netflix account, which gives you 2 simultaneous streams? Anyone know what
Isn't
they're
it like
charging?
$12.
It just went up $1, so it's 13 from what I could see online for a standard 2 viewing things. So the statement that I want you to now consider, it relates to the last question on the previous on the ed puzzle I did for homework 2. But here's the statement in the chat: people should only be able to access antibiotics by subscribing to a pharmaceutical company and making $13 monthly payments on 1-year plans, right? So it's not something you just sign up for when you need it and then you cancel. They're going to hold you to a certain amount of time. I don't know if that's the exact model they're trying to use. But as usual, please text agree, disagree, or neutral. Think about it for a second on that topic, and then I'll split you into breakout rooms again to discuss, and we'll share one more time.
Probably don't need breakout rooms for this.
Apparently not. Let's see. No one wants to be a rebel. Oh, we've got a little variation here. We'll just do maybe the 2. All right, bear with me as I put these together. All right, we got one rebel here. Good, that makes it exciting. Okay, hold on. Sorry, let me make sure I got all the disagrees here. Okay, I think we're good there. All right, so we're going to do the same thing. I hopefully have that right. I went through it pretty quickly. We'll just spend 2 minutes in the breakout rooms. I would like a new speaker. So if you were a speaker previously, you cannot be the speaker again. Breakout rooms are open. We'll come back together in 2 minutes. What's up, Tammy? All right, we are all back. So Tammy was our one agree person. I went and joined him as well. But Tammy had a really good point. So explain, Tammy, why you agree.
So it's kind of like insurance, and it's like depending on your views on that, but it's like you don't always necessarily need it, but it's like when you do actually need it, it's there. And it's like these companies are going to want to make a profit. So it's like if they aren't getting like this regular funding, they're just going to up the price of the antibiotics so that they can turn a profit eventually. So it's like in the long run, it'd probably be cheaper to be paying like a yearly subscription than like assuming you get sick, you start the subscription and then you have it for a year. That'd probably be cheaper than if you're like buying it one off.
All right. Disagree group. Who is your speaker? Let's hear from you, Gabby.
We mostly talked about how like people who are in like impoverished situations won't be able to pay for it, and so like it kind of creates a discriminatory system where people who obviously are from lower income like places won't be able to get the medicine that they need compared to people who are able to pay for it, and it's how that can cause a lot of issues.
Very good point. Neutral group, who's your speaker?
A part of being neutral, we kind of agreed with both sides, but a little bit more with Tammy's. We kind of thought that maybe it shouldn't be a subscription to a certain company, but more like a tax paid to the government. We thought that the price doesn't have to be that high. I mean, the US alone has over like 350 million people. So even if the tax was just $5 a month, that would be a substantial amount of money. And we thought like the price could be low enough to where kind of everybody can afford it. And like Tammy said, it would be almost like insurance. So you're kind of guaranteeing that you have it when you really need it.
Interesting model. Yeah. Not everyone's a fan of taxes, but that could be something like that could work. Interesting. Yeah, the two thoughts that come up hearing from both these groups. So from the agree side, Tammy, I like your insurance analogy. I think that's great. The thought that I came up with though is like, what if people then suddenly feel so brave though that you're like, oh, I've got an antibiotic subscription, so I'm not going to wash my hands anymore. Like, who cares? I'm just going to get every bacterial infection I can. I'll just get my pills in the mail. I would fear that would be a possible response that some people would have. I mean, I know it sounds silly, but you never know. Disagree group, you make a really good point too about just being discriminatory. There would have to be some kind of variation or supplementation to help people get prescriptions. And when I think about the Netflix analogy, I mean, think how many people steal Netflix subscriptions, right? So then how could you control for somebody subscribing for antibiotics, but then just basically requesting them and giving them to someone else, right, who isn't subscribed? I wonder where the control mechanism for that would be. That and Gabby made this good point about, well, what if someone can't afford it? Then what happens? Like, if you don't make your payments, then you just get canceled, and even though you're sick, you can't get your pills. Like, anyway, it brings up interesting issues, and I do wonder. So they are test firing this in England right now, and so I wonder what some of the outcomes are for that. So, any other questions or comments on these two statements, or thoughts on kind of the antibiotic crisis the world's currently in? We'll talk about this more when we get to our How Have Humans Shaped Disease unit. This is going to be a big part of that as well, and we'll get into more details there. So, great. Okay, then the next task is, now that we have discussed bacteria and bacterial infections, the next big source of infectious disease is viruses. And so you got to learn a little bit about the taxonomy and the anatomy and how viruses work. And so what I've done is created an ed puzzle. So I took the chapter from the Gladwin book, which you'll be reading for homework tonight, doing a quiz on. I made a little kind of lecture video that you can watch on ed puzzle, and there's, I think, 4 questions to answer on that. And hopefully that'll set you up well for the reading and the quiz that you have to do for homework. So I'll give you the remainder of class time. We'll come together in about, let's say, 2 minutes before the end of class. So let's just take 10 minutes to at least get started on this ed puzzle, and then you can finish it up for homework. So 10 minutes to work on that ed puzzle, task number 5, and then we'll come back together to check in. Let me know if you have any questions. Go for it. Kiddos, come to a stopping point in your video. Just hit pause. You can pick up where you left off. Actually, never had to use Edpuzzle from a user standpoint. Does anyone know, like, if you were to, like, let's say some of you are, it looks like most of you are about 60% through the video. Does anyone know if you close it and then open it again, does it pick up where it left off? Does Edpuzzle do that, or do you have to like restart, or it just doesn't let you do it? Anyone know?
It depends on how you set it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll go check. Hopefully, I allow multiple attempts. Because yeah, this isn't a graded quiz or anything like that. So I'll go look at that. All right. I hope that was somewhat informative. Your homework for our next lesson, which isn't until Tuesday. There's no school on Monday. So I won't see you guys until Tuesday the 13th. But your homework for then is to complete the Ed puzzle and read chapter 23 in Gladwin. It is 10 pages, but it's mostly images. There's actually not a whole lot of text to get through. And usual deal, 1 page of notes, photo to submit, and there's a short little reading quiz for you to take. You can have up to 10 attempts on that. Feel free to refer to the Ed Puzzle video. I also posted a link to just the slides and just the video there on the task to complete list. The other thing that I want you to do is we are going to try to do a laboratory the next time we meet. We're going to be simulating the spread of disease and looking at the reproductive rate, the R0, and how that varies. So you're going to need the following items. You're going to need 10 cups of some kind. Paper Dixie cups are the best thing, but you can use drinking glasses from home or mugs if you need to. 10 Post-its or just cut out squares of paper for labeling the cups. 10 spoons so that we can contaminate the other cups without actually cross-contaminating the actual utensils. You'll need a water source and some kind of concentrated dark liquid. That's going to be our infected individual, right? So grape juice, Gatorade powder is really good because you can just really concentrate that to get a nice dark color. Dark coffee, if you have food coloring at home, food coloring is really good. But trying to have those items ready for the next time we meet, because we'll spend class time doing a little activity and you're going to be sort of photographing and logging what happens, and then we're going to kind of swap each other's records. You're going to do a little bit of contact tracing. We'll simulate contact tracing. So any questions on the homework? All right, that's it for me, kids. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you.